think there's a chance in hell that he's coming back next year. And so it's kind of an interesting moment that could end up being a major pivot for a few teams. And you know what? The Sixers, give them credit. They fought through it. Embiid wasn't healthy, didn't play like himself, but they put up a heck of a fight. And I'm fascinated to see what the Sixers do now going into next season if they try to run it back. But kudos to them, and even more kudos to the Raptors, who obviously move on and now get a pretty scary Bucks team.
Well, I'm just going to go ahead and give my kudos right now and give Kawhi Leonard my hero of the week. The first buzzer-beating, game-ending field goal in a Game 7 in NBA playoffs history. And it wasn't one that swished right through the net. Unless you're living under a rock, you've seen many highlights of this shot. It bounced off the rim 4 times, Ben. You saw the different camera angles. At one point, it looked like the ball was going to fall off the side of the rim. It did not. That shot went down in the freeze frame of Leonard on his knees and Embiid kind of squatting underneath them and the Raptors teammates on the bench. I mean, that was such an iconic moment. You say that word perfectly, Ben. What a moment for Kawhi. I mean, it's looking like he's pretty much going to stay in Toronto, barring a major upset in the conference finals if the Raptors, let's say, get swept. But kudos to Kawhi, my hero of the week. Granted, took 41 shots to get there, but he put the team on his back, and Game 7 is in the books. Raptors move on. They're going to need a lot of help from Marc Gasol, Kyle Lowry, Pascal Siakam if they're going to make this a series with Milwaukee. But, I mean, I can't say enough good things about this shot. I mean, you were enjoying it so much, you missed Game of Thrones for this shot, Ben.
I did, and you know what? I think the nice thing for Raptors fans, Jason, is that was a heck of a shot. The bad thing is I think that might be the end of the road for them. I don't think that they're ready to play against the Bucks. I think the Bucks are a better team than they are. I felt like it was very evenly matched between those teams. I don't think that the Raptors match up very well against the Bucks, and I think they're about to run into a buzzsaw in this next round. I think the Bucks are built in a way that it's going to make life very, very difficult for them. And you know what? Ben Simmons is a great defender, Jason. He is not Giannis Antetokounmpo. And Antetokounmpo, if he takes Kawhi Leonard in any way, shape, or form out of this series, I just don't think the Raptors have enough to move on. And I mean, to me, as we move into the kind of the prediction part of this for the next round, you know, I think in the East, you're going to see the Bucks win in, I was tempted to say 5 games, but I'll give them 6. But I think the Bucks are going to, I think this is not going to be as close of a series as people might think it is. I think that they've got a good deal more talent on the roster. I think Brogdon coming back is huge. And I just think this might be the Giannis show. I'm interested to see how he plays, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see Giannis lay his claim to best player in the league right now.
Well, I'm going to give the Raptors a little bit more credit. I'm going to go with Bucks in 7. I know the Bucks are getting by on their depth, and that's why they were able to sweep the Pistons and then get past the Celtics in just 5 games. I think you're going to see Giannis really step his game up. It's going to be so much fun to watch him and Kawhi guard one another. But I think Kyle Lowry is going to step up. I think Siakam's going to continue to step up. And then you have playoff savvy Marc Gasol. So I think the Raptors will make this a series, but ultimately the Bucks do have home court, and they're going to win it in 7 and go to the NBA Finals. And we'll leave those up. We'll see what happens. But quick shout out to 2 former Nets. I know we're not doing Nets News of the Week this week. There's nothing going on. But it's kind of cool to see Brook Lopez in Milwaukee and Jeremy Lin in Toronto. One of those 2 players who just 3 years ago were stuck in Kenny Atkinson's rebuild. Now one of them could be playing for an NBA championship ring. So kudos to both Lopez and Jay Lynn. I'm happy for both of them. We'll see what happens in the conference finals. But I know you want to move on to the West because so much has happened. The Rockets-Warriors series, I think we should start there. Kevin Durant goes down. He's still not healthy. Game 1 of the Western Conference Finals is playing in the background as Ben and I are recording this podcast. No return of Kevin Durant in any imminent sight. And they still beat the Rockets in Game 6 on the road, Ben. How?
I mean, let's start by just saying this is one of those they forgot about Dre moments right now. And of course, I'm talking about Andre Iguodala, Jason, who just came out and reminded everyone, oh, there's another pretty good player on this roster besides, the all-stars that we talk about all the time. And Iguodala really burned the Rockets on both ends of the floor. He was one of the best players on the court. I mean, I think you give Curry quite possibly the nod as the best. I think you wouldn't be wrong to give Iguodala number 2. He played phenomenal defense all game long, had 5 steals in that game, and hit every big three that you could have asked him to. And that was what kind of sealed that series. Now, that said, I'm also going to give some big props to Curry. They showed a graphic that he's made some preposterous number of free throws in a row now in fourth quarters and overtime. It's something now, I think it's like 50 in a row that he's made. It's absolutely outrageous. And I was at a bar watching the game, and I said to myself, one of the things for this Warrior team is if they get up in a game, it's really hard to come back on them. I mean, we've seen these big comebacks, but in general, when they get to the last 2 minutes, if they get a lead, it's so difficult to come back because they're just not going to miss that many free throws with Curry and Thompson there. And obviously Durant as well. But Curry is just this ice-cold knockdown shooter who he's not going to miss the free throws, and it makes it really tough. And that's why I have Curry ultimately as my hero of the week. But I almost felt like I needed to do the Iguodala Curry co-heroes, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, both of them and Klay Thompson really stepped up in Durant's absence. You have to question Golden State's depth. I mean, when Kevon Looney's the most efficient player coming off your bench, you're in trouble. The Warriors are down DeMarcus Cousins. They're down to Durant. And what did they do, Ben? They dug deep. They went into their core of what won them their first championship back in 2015. Iguodala has played many meaningful minutes in this postseason and has really been that shoulder for Steph and Klay to lean on when they've struggled, and they put together a vintage Warriors performance. And ultimately, they moved on. I mean, right now they're up 8 on Portland. I think this is going to be a very interesting series. But, I mean, you have to give kudos to Curry. You have to give kudos to Klay, to both Dre's, Von Green, and Iguodala. You like how I did that, Ben?
Oh, yeah.
But, yeah, the Warriors are looking like the old Warriors. And it's really going to take maximum effort from Portland and guys not named Damian Lillard and C.J. McCollum to win this thing. So should be an interesting series, but we'd be remiss, Ben, if we did not at least touch on the disappointment from James Harden and the Houston Rockets. I mean, for the second year in a row, another year of James Harden's prime gone to nothing, dusted like a Thanos snap because they lost in the second round. I mean, where do the Rockets go from here, Ben?
Well, I mean, I'm going to I'm not going to lie here. I don't agree with a lot of the criticism that is going on with the Rockets. I think, first of all, if you really stop and look at the talent from these rosters when they started this series, it's a no contest. I think you got to give the Rockets credit for getting every ounce out of the talent they have on the roster. If you just go at the top 7 players on both teams, it's laughable. I mean, even without DeMarcus Cousins, the Warriors have 2 of probably the top 5 players in the league, another of the top 20, 25 players in Thompson, and probably another one potentially in Draymond Green. When he's locked in, he is that good. And then Iguodala, who is a really, really good player. I mean, we only see him on the Warriors where he doesn't really play the minutes that he used to, but I mean, they're just unbelievable, and they're so talented that I think people forget about it. I think that this was a series where the Warriors just eked it out. I thought James Harden played really well in this whole series. I thought he made the right read, and I thought that the Rockets felt like they were kind of one player short at points in this series. Like they didn't have the guy. Like there was a game where PJ Tucker would step up. There'd be a game where Eric Gordon stepped up. I mean, Clint Capella did not have a good series, but it didn't feel like they really had that third guy who they could just go to every time. Gordon had his moments, and then he faded. And if you look at that Game 6, if there's one guy who really had to be there and just didn't show up, it was Eric Gordon. Eric Gordon only had 9 points in that game, and they needed a big game from him, and he just didn't show up. He disappeared, and that really, really hurt them. But if you're the Rockets, I mean, that's kind of life of with Eric Gordon as potentially your third best player. I mean, you're just kind of stuck with that. I feel like they deserve credit for getting as far as they did and challenging this Warriors team. So I don't feel like they choked or anything like that, Jason.
I do. And this is where I disagree because the Rockets are screwed. They're going to be paying a 36-year-old Chris Paul $44 million in a couple of years. He's no longer a number 2 option. As great as Chris Paul is, he's going to the Hall of Fame, Ben, but he is not a number 2 on a championship team. I mean, what's it going to take for a Chris Paul and James Harden-led team to make it out of the West? This team had so much potential, and they blew it. I have in the notes here that is James Harden a regular season player, and I've changed my stance on that. I'm going to go with no, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Mike D'Antoni is a regular season coach. Is his system great? Sure, it gets players paid because they jack up 63s a night, and they make half of them. So you got guys that would score 8 points on one team, averaging 20 on another. But I'm making Harden, D'Antoni, and the Rockets my zero of the week because this was their golden opportunity, Ben.
True.
This was their chance. Kevin Durant goes down. This was their shot. They would have beaten Portland handily, and instead they go home early yet again. I mean, I don't understand, Ben, how you could sit here and make excuses for the Rockets, and I get how good Harden is, but this is a joke. The Warriors should have lost to them last year and this year, and yet again they move on. So I know I'm getting a little fired up here, but the Rockets are my zero of the week. This is inexplicable how Harden could not lead his team past the Warriors without KD. If Kevin Durant did not get hurt and played a full series and they lost in 6, fine. But you had a chance to force a Game 7 at home, and you lose in front of Daenerys Targaryen, Ben.
You know what, though? I mean, I thought that the thing
Ben?
about this series, Jason, is I think that Harden, he created so much here for the rest of his team. And I think if you're looking at this, that the problems that really strike you on this roster were one, Clint Capella. Clint Capella is where a lot of this starts and ends. The amount of money that they're paying Capella, and he just couldn't show up in the series. I mean, the Warriors played him off the court for all intents and purposes. I mean, Austin Rivers was probably more valuable in this series than Clint Capella, and that probably just about says it all. And the way that Eric Gordon played, that was the other kind of nail in their coffin. You know, they needed more from those guys. PJ Tucker was everything they needed. Chris Paul gave them a hell of a Game 6. And Harden, he did just about all you could ask, Jason. I mean, the thing is, you can look at his stats and you can say, oh, well, he didn't put up the numbers that he did in the regular season. But the truth is that the Warriors forced him to play that way. And he made the right reads during the game. He passed the ball. He created so many good shots for the Warriors, for the Rockets, even though he wasn't the one getting the assist. And I actually, this kind of changed my view of him a little bit because I was terrified every time he took a shot. And yet, at the same time, if you double him, he just hits the open guy every time. And I kind of contrasted it to Kawhi Leonard, who everyone is obviously giving a lot of credit to. And the truth was, against the Sixers, when they doubled Kawhi, he was not nearly as good when they doubled him as Harden was. I mean, Harden got them wide open shots every time they doubled him. I mean, he killed the Warriors in this series. And if you look at the end of the day, you look at what happened this postseason, I think you can very fairly say Harden played about as well as you could ask given the defensive schemes. And I think his supporting cast let him down. Jason, I'm not going to put it at D'Antoni's feet. I'm going to put it at the supporting cast because, you know, they just didn't give them enough. I mean, Iman Shumpert was awful. Gerald Green was borderline unplayable. Daniel House gave them nothing. Austin Rivers was a lot better in the next round than he was in the first, but there were still moments that he made some really poor decisions. Clint Capella was invisible for most of the series. Eric Gordon just disappeared, Jason. And I mean, I think if you put